Welcome to Deep Sleep Story. This is your space for stillness, a place where quiet stories unfold slowly, where breath deepens, and the day gently fades. If you've come here searching for calm, rest, and something deeper than just a bedtime tale, you're exactly where you need to be. Tonight's journey will take you through the Carpathian mountains, through memory, through silence, and through the kind of moments that live just beneath the waking world. If this kind of storytelling speaks to your heart, please consider subscribing to Deep Sleep Story, giving the video a like, or leaving a comment. Your presence here helps keep these stories alive. Now close your eyes. Let your shoulders drop. Take a slow, gentle breath. And allow the forest to carry you. This is Ash Beneath the Pines. The first sound was snow. Not the fall of it, but the shift. The soft sigh it gave when weight pressed into it gently. Like a breath drawn into an old chest. Dimitro heard it long before he saw her. He stood just beyond the tree line, one hand resting on the curved handle of his axe, the other clutching a steel flask that had long since stopped holding anything warm. He was not waiting. He had stopped waiting years ago. But when he saw the woman appear at the bend of the white road, he knew she was the one he had been sent to meet. She walked like someone unused to snow, carefully, but not fearfully. Her coat was thick and practical, but not local. Her scarf was wrapped tight, and her boots bore the dark sheen of city leather softened by train station salt. She carried a cloth bag, slung crosswise over her shoulder, worn at the seams. When she reached him, she stopped a few feet away. Her cheeks were flushed, but not from embarrassment. "You're Dimitro?" she asked. Her voice was tired but clear, like someone who had been reading aloud for too long. He nodded once. "And you're the one looking for lullabies?" She gave a half-smile. "You make it sound foolish." "I didn't say that," he replied. "But the pines don't sing like they used to." He turned, motioning toward the tree line. She followed without further word. They walked in silence for some time. The trees, tall and ancient, leaned in from either side as though curious. Every now and then, a gust of wind disturbed the surface of the snow, brushing it like fingers combing through ash. Finally, she spoke again. "My name is Svetlana. I'm with the Institute of Oral Heritage." "I know," he said. "You were informed?" He shook his head. "I listened." A pause. Then, "What does that mean?" He glanced at her sidelong. "It means you've been talking to people in places where most folks stopped talking years ago. That leaves a sound behind. Like a kettle after it's boiled." She didn't answer. But he saw her jaw move slightly, not with annoyance. More like someone adjusting to altitude. The path narrowed, winding between two crooked firs that arched overhead like an old archway. Beyond it, the forest grew denser. The snow here was untouched. "No one comes this way?" she asked. "No one wants to," he said. "Or remembers how." They passed an old shrine, half collapsed, its wooden roof sloped with age and the weight of long-forgotten prayers. A string of faded ribbons clung to one side, moving slightly in the windless air. Dimitro paused just long enough to remove his hat. Svetlana mirrored the gesture, more out of respect than belief. "Do you believe in all this?" she asked softly. He replaced his hat. "I believe in what people leave behind. And what doesn't want to be left." By midday, they reached the first cabin, an abandoned way house once used by herbalists and smugglers. The roof sagged but held. Inside, it was dry, and there was still a stove, black with ash but intact. Dimitro began preparing a fire without instruction. Svetlana sat on a low bench near the wall and pulled a small cloth-bound notebook from her bag. She flipped through pages already filled with spidery notes, diagrams of song patterns, and lyrics half-transcribed. "Do they really sing lullabies out here?" she asked after a while. He didn't look up from the stove. "They did. Before the roads were straightened. Before the names changed. And now?" He struck a match. The flame caught slowly. "Now they hum. Soft enough that only those who haven't slept in a long time can hear it." She stared at him. Not in disbelief, but with something else. Recognition, perhaps. He looked at her directly for the first time since their meeting. You haven't been sleeping. It wasn't a question. No, she said. I don't sleep much either, he replied. Not since I came back. From where? He turned back to the stove. Doesn't matter. The fire caught. The cabin grew warmer. Outside, the wind shifted. And somewhere, in the trees, something moved. Not large. Not dangerous. But deliberate. That night, they stayed in the cabin. Neither spoke much over the simple meal: dried bread, warmed beans, and a single apple she had packed from the city. Afterward, she lay on her bedroll near the stove. He sat in a low chair beside the door, knife in hand, whittling quietly. The wood made no noise as it curled away under his blade. Why did you agree to help me? She asked at last. He didn't look up. Because you're asking about the old songs. Not the ones sung at parades. The ones whispered. I'm not interested in politics, she said. Good, he replied. The mountains don't care for them. She stared into the fire. I once heard a song, she said quietly. My grandmother used to hum it when she thought no one was listening. I don't remember the words. But the tune never left me. I've been trying to find it again ever since. Dimitro said nothing. But he nodded, just once. Outside, the wind had stopped. And in the pause between snowflakes, something else arrived. Not a sound. Not a footstep. Just presence. As if the woods had noticed them. And chosen not to speak. Not yet. From the story, Ash Beneath the Pines. The second day began in stillness. No birds. No wind. No distant howls. Only snow falling so lightly, it seemed unsure whether it should land. Dimitro was already outside when Svetlana stirred, brushing frost from her scarf and pulling her notebook tighter to her chest. She found him crouched near a birch stump, fingers pressed into the frozen earth. He looked up but didn't greet her. They were here, he said. Who? He stood, brushing his hands. Someone walking against the grain. She didn't ask what that meant. By now she'd begun to understand. Dimitro didn't speak in riddles. He spoke in patterns. And the forest around him seemed to recognize those patterns. They resumed the trail around mid-morning. The path wound beneath older trees now, pines tall and silent, their trunks wide enough to hide a man twice over. The snow here had not been disturbed for days. Or longer. But then, just beyond a bend in the trail, they saw him. A boy. He sat on a flat stone at the base of a massive tree, knees tucked to his chest, hands flat on the bark. He was not hiding. Nor waiting. He was listening. Svetlana stopped. The boy didn't move. He wore a heavy wool tunic, patched and threadbare. His hair was dark, longish, and tangled with pine needles. A leather pouch hung at his side, and at his feet, spread out carefully like cards, lay thin sheets of birch bark marked with hundreds of tiny lines, dashes, and circles. When she stepped closer, his eyes opened. They were green. Dark, ancient green, like lichen under stone. You step like someone who doesn't know if she wants to be heard, he said softly. Svetlana blinked. Sorry? The boy turned to Dimitro. She thinks too loudly. Dimitro gave a quiet grunt, amusement, not mockery. She's from the city. There's more noise there. The boy looked back to her. Noise doesn't come from cities. It comes from forgetting what silence sounds like. He picked up a piece of bark and held it toward her. She crouched, taking it gently. Her fingers brushed the rough edge, and she felt, strangely, a warmth there. As if the wood still remembered being part of something living. Lines covered it in curving spirals, like a language just out of reach. It's a song, the boy said. Sort of. You wrote this? No. The tree did. I just copied it. You have to do it fast, or it forgets the shape. Svetlana glanced up. How can a tree forget? He shrugged. Same way people do. Too much snow on top. She looked at Dmytro, expecting skepticism. But Dmytro was kneeling now, head bowed, fingers grazing one of the bark sheets reverently. He's been doing this since they found him. 5 winters ago, Dmytro said. No parents. No name. Just a bag full of bark, and silence. I have a name, the boy added. But it's not ready yet. Svetlana tilted her head. What does that mean? The boy smiled, only slightly. Some names come when you need them. Others, wait until you're finished. She lowered herself to sit on a nearby root, snow crunching beneath her. Can I ask what these are for? They're not for anything. They just are. He shuffled one bark piece aside, revealing another with sharper angles. This one came after the man in the brown coat passed through. When? 2 nights ago. He was loud. Not with his feet. With his wanting. Svetlana's brow furrowed. What did he want? The boy traced one of the lines with his finger. To be remembered. But not for what he did. Dmytro stood. His face had gone unreadable. Which way did he go? The boy pointed south. But the trees don't like him. So they won't follow. Svetlana set the bark down, almost reluctantly. Why do you stay here? She asked. Alone? I'm not alone, the boy said. They sing when it's quiet. You can't always hear them with ears. Sometimes they only speak in dreams. She hesitated. My grandmother used to hum a song in her sleep, she said. No words. Just a melody. I've been trying to find it again ever since. The boy nodded. Maybe it found you. She blinked. What do you mean? He tapped her notebook. You keep writing it down, hoping it will stay. But some songs don't live on paper. They live in what you remember when you stop trying. Svetlana stared at him. Then said quietly, I don't sleep much. He looked at her, almost sadly. I know. He began gathering his sheets, bundling them in a leather wrap. Then, before turning to leave, he paused. When you hear the lullaby again, don't sing it out loud. Why not? Because it knows you. She opened her mouth to ask what that meant. But he was already walking, not running, not hiding. Just moving away. Like a falling leaf. They watched until he disappeared into the trees. They made camp early that night, in a hollow beneath a slope where the snow drifted high but the wind didn't reach. Dmytro built the fire with quiet precision. Svetlana sat with her notebook open, staring at the blank page. You've stopped writing, he said. She nodded slowly. I'm afraid I'll trap something that wants to stay moving. He poked the fire. Good. You're learning. Later, when the flames had settled to coals, Svetlana asked, Have you heard anything in the trees? Dmytro was silent for a long while. Then he said, Yes. She waited. He continued softly. The year I returned from the front, I walked into these woods and stayed for weeks. Didn't speak to anyone. I had a fever once, thought I might not wake up. But I did. And I heard something singing outside the cabin. Not a person. Not a bird. Just something that remembered I was still here. He looked into the fire. I never found what it was. But it gave me enough to stay alive. Svetlana wrapped her arms around her knees. Do you think that boy is real? Dmytro gave the smallest smile. He's real enough to be missed if he vanished. The wind shifted outside. No howl. Just a murmur. And in it, for the briefest moment, a faint melody. Like the sigh of breath over hollow wood. Svetlana didn't move. She just listened. And this time, she did not write it down. The forest thickened. Not with trees, but with silence. A heavier kind now, like a shawl worn too long. Even the snow fell more slowly here, as if unsure whether to land. Dmytro's breath clouded in short bursts. His shoulders were taut again, not from cold, but from memory. There's a place ahead, he said. We won't stop long. Svetlana squinted through the pines. A village? He shook his head. Just one house. But that's enough. They crossed a shallow gully where broken roots clawed from the frozen earth like fingers. Then, through a thicket of bare dogwood, it appeared. A hut. Crooked. Sinking to one side. Smoke drifted from a narrow chimney that leaned like an old man after prayer. The roof was patched with what looked like canvas sacks. A single crooked window glowed with amber light. And hanging in the bare trees around it, dozens of glass jars. Suspended by strings. Some swayed gently, though no wind touched them. Svetlana stopped. What are they? Dmytro didn't answer. But he approached slowly, deliberately, as though each step might stir something meant to remain still. He knocked once on the doorframe, not the door. Then stepped aside. The door creaked open without touch. And there she stood. A woman, small, wrapped in layers of wool and shawl, her hands hidden in sleeves, her eyes pale but sharp. Her face was deeply lined, but not tired. She looked not old, but used to time. Her voice was thin, but sure. Well, it's been a while since anyone arrived with both feet on the ground. Dmytro gave a respectful nod. Evening, Ol. Is it? She replied. I stopped measuring. Svetlana stepped forward, uncertain. Ol eyed her. You're not from here. No, Svetlana said. I'm looking for songs that don't want to be found. The woman finished. Yes, I know. She turned, not inviting, not refusing. Just moving. Come in then. But don't breathe too loudly. The interior was warmer than expected. Not cozy, but full of life. A stove ticked gently in the corner, and bundles of herbs hung from the beams, drying in ghostly bunches. There were no chairs. Just cushions, crates, and rugs layered like sediment. But what caught Svetlana's eye were the jars. Lined along every shelf, stacked in corners, tucked beside booths. Some were clear, others clouded. All sealed. And each had a label, not with a name, but with a word. Wait. 13. Gone. Still. North. Unkissed. Sister. She moved toward one. A large jar near the stove. Inside it, something gray. Thin. Almost like a curl of smoke. Or a shadow that had forgotten how to stand. Don't open it, Ol said from behind. I wasn't going to, Svetlana replied. Ol smiled, thin, knowing. They don't like being touched once they've settled. What are they? Svetlana asked. Leftovers, Ol said. Things people lost on their way home. She pulled a tin cup from a crate and poured tea, dark, bitter, smelling of pine and something else. I used to keep them in a book, she added. But they didn't like the paper. So now, jars. Dmytro accepted the tea silently. He didn't sit. He never did, in this house. Svetlana crouched by another shelf. A jar labeled soft held what looked like the corner of a scarf. One labeled vassal contained a child's button, green and cracked. One labeled tomorrow was empty. She turned back to Ol. Where did you get these? Ol sipped her tea. They find me. Svetlana sat cross-legged on a faded cushion. The floor creaked beneath her, not dangerously, just honestly. Have you ever found someone's whole self? Ol looked at her for a long moment. No, she said softly. But I've found the part they left behind. She reached into her shawl and produced a small jar, no bigger than a palm. Inside, a twist of pale hair, and a torn bit of newspaper, yellowed and folded. The label read, Duma. This one came from a man who walked the ridge trail last winter, Ol said. Didn't say a word. Just wept. Then left this under a stone. Svetlana leaned forward. What happened to him? I think he made it home, Ol said. But not all of him. She set the jar down. Then looked at Svetlana closely. You're carrying something too. It's not in your hands, but it's loud. Svetlana tensed. What do you mean? Ol's voice was gentler now. You've been looking for a song. But what you're really trying to find is where it ended. Silence. A long one. Then, my sister, Svetlana whispered. She vanished during the evacuation. We were children. I never saw her again. But she used to hum something soft before bed. I think it's what I've been chasing ever since. Ol nodded. Then I have something to offer. She turned and opened a narrow drawer. Inside, a single jar. Clear. Empty. The label read, Yours. I can give you back what you lost, Ol said. But it will cost you. Svetlana's voice barely held. What? Your shadow. Svetlana blinked. You mean? Not the one you see, Ol said. The one that follows you when no light is needed. The one that dreams in your place. And if I give it, you'll remember her song. But only once. Svetlana looked to Dmitro. He said nothing. Only met her gaze, deeply, calmly. Then looked away. She reached for the jar. But just before her fingers touched the glass, she stopped. Closed her hand. And whispered, Not yet. Ol's smile was small, but kind. Good. The forest respects those who choose to wait. Svetlana rose. And Dmitro stepped toward the door. Thank you, Ol, he said softly. Come back when the pines stop shaking, she replied. They stepped outside. The snow had stopped. The jars in the trees barely swayed. But one, just one, made a sound. A low, humming note. Like the end of a lullaby someone hadn't finished singing. They reached the river by dusk. It was wider than Svetlana expected, a broad, pale ribbon wound between the trees like a forgotten road. Snow covered its surface, but beneath that skin was ice, and under the ice, silence. Too much of it. Dmitro slowed his pace near the bank. He didn't step closer. He simply stood and looked. Svetlana joined him, brushing frost from her coat. Is it frozen solid? He shook his head. Not solid. Just quiet. The wind moved slightly. Not cold, just thoughtful. There was a village here once, he said, pointing toward a stand of birches on the opposite bank. Woodcutters. A church. A ferry. What happened to it? He turned to her. The river fell asleep. She frowned. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything, he replied. One spring, the water didn't rise. The ferry stayed still. The people waited. But the current never returned. The whole river stopped moving, as if it had seen something it refused to carry. She looked at the wide, silent expanse. And the village? He shrugged. Some left. Some stayed too long. Some tried to wake the river. She turned sharply. What does that mean? He didn't answer. They made camp in a low bend beside the frozen bank. Dmitro set no fire this time. The air was too still, the trees too alert. Instead, he unfurled a wool blanket and handed her a pouch of dried berries. Svetlana sat close, notebook on her lap, but she didn't write. There's something wrong with this place, she said quietly. Dmitro nodded. It remembers. They listened for a long while. Then, beneath the ice, a sound. Not cracking. Not shifting. Just a knock. Soft. Hollow. Measured. Like someone gently tapping from beneath. Svetlana froze. Did you hear? Yes. He rose and took a step closer to the river's edge. His boots crunched through the snow, then stilled on the thin crust of ice. He crouched. The knock came again. And with it, a shape. Small. Near the surface. A dark blur just beneath the crust. Dmitro stood quickly and returned to her. We move at first light. But they didn't sleep. Not really. The knocking continued, off and on through the night. And just before dawn, it stopped. They crossed the river carefully. The ice held. But it complained, not loudly, just enough to remind them it wasn't entirely willing. In the middle, Svetlana paused and looked down. There, beneath her boots, something round. A face? A mask? No. A doll. Pressed against the underside of the ice. eyes wide, smile carved, one arm missing. She didn't tell Dimitro. She didn't know why. On the far side, the land rose steeply. The trail turned into stone, jagged, half-buried, like bones beneath the forest. They climbed in silence until the trees thinned again, revealing the remnants of a small stone bridge. It led nowhere now. Just ended. Beyond it, only snow. And someone sitting on a log. A man. He wore a long coat, military, perhaps, frayed at the cuffs, collar turned high. His boots were mismatched. One glove was missing. He didn't look up as they approached. But when Dimitro cleared his throat, the man spoke. "You're late." His voice was calm. Tired. "We weren't expected," Dimitro said. The man smiled slightly. "Everyone is expected. Just not always by people." He turned his face toward them. Thin. Bearded. Eyes pale blue. "You crossed the sleeping river," he said. Svetlana nodded cautiously. He gestured toward the air. "She's grateful. But she still wants to be alone." Dimitro took a step closer. "Why are you here?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden button. He held it in his palm like a relic. "I lost a coat once," he said. "Many years ago. My mother sewed this on the sleeve. She told me to keep it close, even if I grew out of the rest." He looked at the button, not them. "Every time I bury someone I take one off. Leave it under stone. For the ones who were never found." A silence stretched. Svetlana finally spoke. "How many have you buried?" The man didn't answer. He just reached into his coat and pulled out a small bag. It clinked. Faintly. Dozens of buttons. He stood slowly, then held the bag out to her. "You'll need one," he said, "before you finish your road." She hesitated, then took it. The bag was heavier than it should have been. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, not back down the path, not into the trees. Just forward, into white, until he was gone. Dimitro didn't move for a long time. Finally, he said, "I knew his face. A long time ago. But I didn't know his name." Svetlana opened the bag and looked inside. Buttons. Each different. And at the bottom, one carved of dark bone, with a single letter etched in red S. She closed the bag gently. "I think he was real," she said. Dimitro nodded. "Real enough to carry what we won't." They moved on. Behind them, the river slept. But somewhere in the woods, a single button fell into snow and was covered. Slowly, like a memory being forgiven. The slope rose slowly, but with purpose, like the spine of something old, resting beneath the forest. Pines gave way to spruces, and the air grew thinner, laced with cold smoke and cedar. They walked without speaking. Since the man on the log, the one with the buttons, Dimitro had grown quieter. Not just in words, but in breath and step. As if he'd started walking beside someone else. Someone unseen. Svetlana clutched the small bag he'd given her. She hadn't opened it again. She wasn't sure if she wanted to. The trail veered sharply and curved around a mossy rock face. There, nestled between two ridges, stood a wooden shelter. Simple. Low. Smoke curling from a stone chimney. They paused at the edge of the clearing. "Someone's inside," Dimitro murmured. Svetlana looked at him. "Do we go around?" He shook his head. "No. We knock." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because some ghosts leave the door open. Others wait for it to be closed." They stepped forward. Dimitro rapped gently on the frame. The door opened almost immediately. A man stood there, tall, gaunt, in a faded wool uniform with no insignia. He was bald, save for a ring of silver hair at the temples. His hands were large. One gloved. One bare. The bare hand held a spoon. He blinked slowly, then stepped aside. "You'll eat," he said. Not a question. just certainty. They entered. Inside, warm light. A small table. A bowl of steaming stew. A map on the wall, hand-drawn, marked with dozens of small black dots. No labels. Just dots. And along the far shelf, uniform buttons. All kinds. Arranged in rows. Polished. Numbered. Matched. Sorted. Svetlana sat. Dmytro stood. The man stirred the stew and ladled it into 2 chipped bowls. "You came through the river," he said. Svetlana nodded. "How did you know?" He tapped his temple. "She carries silence. You carry songs. The river likes both. But never at once." Dmytro spoke then. "Were you a soldier?" The man looked at the buttons. "I was all of them." He reached into his chest pocket and produced a single button, silver, round, plain. "This is the last one," he said. "I never sewed it." "Why?" Svetlana asked. He looked at her, not sternly, but as one might look at a child who's asked something they already know. "Because if I sew it, I'm finished." He set the button on the table. It wobbled once, then stilled. "I buried the rest," he added. "Not with bodies. With places. I've hidden them beneath bridges, beneath roots, behind stone crosses." "Why?" she whispered. "So no one forgets where the war stopped." Svetlana's throat tightened. Dmytro's hands flexed at his sides. "I saw men burn their own boots," the man continued, "so the snow would swallow their prints. I saw a boy walk 4 days after his lungs stopped working. And I saw an officer throw away his medals because he said they kept him from sleeping." He pointed to the wall map. "Every dot is a place where someone fell and wasn't named. Do you remember them all?" Svetlana asked. He looked at her, then at Dmytro, and said nothing. But the silence he gave felt heavier than yes. Later he poured tea. Bitter. Black. As they drank, he told them a story. About a soldier who once dropped his final button into a crack in the floorboards. And how, ever since, the house he died in creaks every night at the same hour, the sound of the button trying to return. "No one believes it," he said. "But every year, someone still leaves a thread at the door." When it came time to sleep, the man unrolled a wool blanket and placed it near the fire. "You'll be safe here," he said. "I don't let memories pass the threshold after dark." Svetlana lay down, but didn't close her eyes. She watched the silver button on the table. It hadn't moved. But somehow, she knew it was listening. Just before dawn, she rose quietly and approached the shelf. Each button had a number. Some had initials. One read, LD, engraved faintly on brass. She touched it gently. Behind her, the soldier spoke. "Don't take it." She turned. "I wasn't going to." He nodded. "Good. That one still waits." "For whom?" He looked into the dark corner of the room. "For the one who said her name last." When they left, the soldier gave Dmytro a small folded map. Hand-drawn. A new trail. "If you walk this way," he said. "But it leads to what you're not sure you're looking for." He turned to Svetlana, then handed her the silver button. "I was never going to sew it," he said. "But maybe it belongs to someone you remember." She took it. It was warm. They walked long that day. Past rock. Past snow. Through stands of trees so thin, they looked like ribs. When they paused to drink, Svetlana finally opened the small sack from the man near the river. Inside, 20 buttons. Different shapes. Different stories. And among them, one nearly identical to the silver button she now held, but broken. Chipped at the edge. She held them both side by side. Not twins, but once. Perhaps sewn to the same coat. Dmytro looked over her shoulder. And for the first time since they met, he whispered, "I knew a boy once. In a town with a stone mill. He used to whistle while stitching buttons to uniforms he would never wear." She turned to him. "Did he survive?" Dmytro didn't answer. But his silence spoke like a bell. Just before it rings. From ash beneath the pines, the forest opened like an old wound. One blink, and there it was, a village. Not marked on any map. Not built for eyes that still remembered cities. Just there. Snow drifted in lazy spirals over a ring of wooden houses. None looked ruined, only quiet. Roofs intact. Wells covered. Firewood stacked beneath eaves with the kind of care that says someone once believed winter would end. But it hadn't. Not here. Svetlana stepped forward slowly, notebook clutched to her chest. Dmytro stayed a step behind. His eyes didn't search, they watched, like someone recognizing a dream he'd once chosen to forget. "What is this place?" she asked, though she already sensed the answer. "Rhinoc," he said. "Or it used to be." She frowned. "I've seen no mention of a Rhinoc." "You wouldn't. It forgot itself." They passed the first house. The shutters were shut, but light flickered faintly through the cracks. A small wooden doll sat on the windowsill, hand-carved, smiling with half a face. Another home had laundry pinned to a line, stiff, frozen in the act of waving. Svetlana approached a door and gently knocked. No answer. She pressed an ear against the wood. Inside, the sound of a chair creaking. But no footsteps. She backed away. Dmytro placed a hand on her shoulder. "They don't open for strangers. Not until they know who you are. But they're watching?" He nodded. "They're waiting." Near the center of the village stood a stone chapel. Weather-beaten, small, without a bell in its tower. The kind of place where prayers are whispered, not declared. Inside, the room was circular. And seated around it, 20 people. Some old, some young. All dressed plainly. Each in a chair. Eyes closed. Bodies upright, as if listening to something just outside the realm of hearing. Svetlana froze. "They're not asleep," she whispered. "No," said a voice behind her. A girl stood in the doorway. 18, maybe? Long coat. Braided hair. Bare hands red with cold, but she didn't shiver. "I think they're waiting," she said. "For someone to speak their names." Svetlana turned. "Do you know them?" The girl shook her head. "Not anymore. I forgot too. But you carry something. I heard it last night in my dreams. A sound I used to follow." She stepped forward and said softly, "I think you brought my name with you." They spoke beside the empty well, where a bench of stones circled like an old watchful eye. "My mother used to sing a song," the girl said. "But when the names began to fade, the song grew shorter, softer, until it was just breath. Now no one sings at all." Dmytro crouched beside the well and looked down. "There's water." The girl nodded. "It only reflects what you remember. If you forget too much, it shows nothing." Svetlana glanced at her notebook. "I don't know your name. I don't even know mine." The girl tilted her head. "Then we're alike." Silence fell. Then Svetlana reached into her coat and pulled out the small glass jar from O. The label read, "Yours." She opened it. A low hum slipped out, not music, not speech, but recognition. The girl inhaled sharply. "That's it." She ran to the chapel, straight to one of the seated women, perhaps 50, face lined, hands folded in her lap. The girl knelt and whispered, "Mama." The woman's eyes opened. She smiled faintly. And the girl, suddenly a child again, buried her face in her mother's lap. Not crying, only breathing. Later, another man emerged from a small home, tall, with a cane, a coat too big for him. He walked with the careful balance of someone who hadn't moved in years. He approached Dmytro. "You came from the ridge," he said. "I did." "You passed the sleeping river." "Yes." "Did you see the boy?" Dmytro hesitated. "With the birch bark?" The man nodded. "My son." Svetlana's eyes widened. "He's alive," she said. Alone, but listening. The man exhaled slowly. Good. He wouldn't speak here. Not after the forgetting began. Said the trees remembered better than we ever did. Dimitro stared at him. Why didn't you go after him? The man looked at the snow. When you forget who you are, your legs don't know where to walk. As dusk came, the village changed. Not in light, but in presence. Doors cracked open. Not wide, just enough. Someone lit a lantern near the well. Another placed bread on a porch. No one spoke. But people moved, as if remembering how to live. And in the chapel, more eyes opened. Svetlana stood at the threshold. She counted 8. She didn't need to know their names. She just needed to see them breathe. That night, Dimitro didn't sleep. He sat on a wooden bench outside the last house in the row, the only one with a broken shutter. Svetlana found him there, staring into the dark. You knew this place, she said. A pause. Then, once, he pulled something from his coat. A photograph. Worn. Faded. A girl, maybe 15. Smiling. Hair in a braid. My cousin, he said. She was sent here in 44. To hide. She never came back. Svetlana sat beside him. What was her name? He closed his eyes and whispered, Irina. They sat in stillness. Then Svetlana stood, walked to the chapel, and said softly, Irina. The girl turned, smiled, and for the first time, said it herself. They left in the morning. The girl, Irina, stood near the well, hand in her mother's. Thank you, she said. Svetlana nodded. Do you want anything brought back? Irina pointed to the chapel tower. There was a bell. Once. Before we stopped needing it. If you find it, bring it back. Dimitro tilted his head. Why? The girl said. Because bells don't ask who you are. They only ring. She stepped back. And the door closed. Not with finality, but with peace. At the ridge, just before the path turned to stone, Svetlana looked back. No one stood in the square. But the snow around the chapel had melted. Just enough. For 20 footprints. And one pair. Smaller. Newer. Beside them. The trail turned north, steep, narrow, more stone than soil. Pines thinned into crooked spears, clinging to rock as if reluctant to let go. Snow no longer drifted. It hovered in the air like held breath. Not many come this way, Dimitro said. Svetlana glanced at him. Why? He didn't answer right away. Just looked up toward the white sky and said, Because some paths don't lead to places. They lead to sounds. They climbed in silence for a long time, their boots brushing powder into the air. The cold was different here, not biting, but dry, pure, almost listening. As though the mountain had learned to hush everything. Then they saw it. The tower. It rose from the ridge like a forgotten tooth of the earth. Not tall, but heavy, wide at the base and leaning slightly east, as if weary of its own purpose. Stone, ancient and soot-darkened in patches, scarred by wind and time. A slit-like doorway yawned near the bottom, and above, the bell, dark iron, wide-mouthed, unmoving. There was no rope. No lever. Just the bell, resting in its cradle, waiting. And yet, it felt ready. Near the base of the tower, beside a ruined trail marker, sat a man and a dog. The man wore a patched coat, too large at the shoulders, and stirred something hot in a battered pot. The dog, grizzled, heavy-limbed, lay with its muzzle in the snow, eyes open. The man looked up at them as they approached. Not startled. Not welcoming. Just aware. You came for the bell, he said. Svetlana nodded. You know about it? I do, he said. I'm its neighbor. You live here? He gave a short laugh. No one lives here. I just haven't finished listening. He stood slowly, with the weariness of a man who remembers too many mornings. In one hand he held a wooden spoon. In the other, a tin cup. I've watched 3 people go into that tower. All different. One didn't come out. One forgot why she went. One rang it. What happened to him? Dimitro asked. The man scratched his beard. He started walking. South. Never looked back. The dog raised its head slightly. The man added, If it rings for you, don't run. And don't speak. Let it echo. Let it finish. Svetlana's voice was tight. What if it doesn't ring? He looked at her. Then you weren't the one carrying the wind. They entered the tower just before dusk. Inside, cold, round silence. The stone was cracked in places, old mortar flaking like dried bark. Wind moved through the slits in the wall in long, hollow notes, not like whistling, but like breath over bone. At the center, beneath the opening above, stood a shallow circular dais. Etchings covered it, strange markings, uneven, as if drawn with hands that had forgotten language but still remembered rhythm. Svetlana knelt. These aren't letters. Dimitro touched one of the grooves. They're names. Not written. Remembered. Above them, the bell loomed, immense, dusted with frost. A halo of old snow circled its base where light never reached. There's no clapper, she said. There never was, he answered. She looked at him. Then how does it ring? Dimitro stepped into the center of the stone dais. He took off his gloves, folded them, and placed them at his feet. Then softly, with truth, and he closed his eyes. The first sound was deep. Not a chime, not a clang, but a pull, like something behind the ribs shifting, searching, unlocking. The wind outside stopped. Not died. Listened. Then, the bell rang. Not with volume, but with presence. A tone that filled the stone, filled the skin, filled the space behind the eyes. It moved through them like water moves through soil, slowly, deeply, permanently. Svetlana stumbled back. And then it began. Not a vision, but a remembering. She saw a train station. A girl, small, in a coat too big, holding a paper dove. A mother calling. A siren. The girl's voice. I'll remember your song, even if I forget your face. Then snow. Too much snow. A crowd. An empty space. A doll dropped on the platform. Svetlana gasped. Her knees buckled. She fell to the stone. She could hear the song, soft, off-key. It wasn't a lullaby. It was a goodbye. When it ended, the bell fell silent again. The sound lingered, but only inside. Dimitro knelt beside her. His voice was rough. You saw something? She nodded. Her. My sister. That day. The last one. He looked at the bell. She remembers you too. They stayed there through the night. Not sleeping. Just still. At dawn, Svetlana woke to a soft sound. Not the bell. But another. From below. She rose and pressed her ear to the floor. A vibration. Faint. Steady. Ding. A pause. Ding. She turned to Dimitro. There's another bell. He nodded. Beneath. For those the first one didn't reach. Do we follow it? He stood slowly, carefully. No. Not us. Then who? He looked to the arch of light spilling through the tower slit. Those who are still walking. Still forgetting. The bell called the wind. Now the wind carries them. Svetlana opened her notebook. Wrote one word. Not a lyric. Not a name. Just, I remember. Outside, the world had changed. Not much. But the trees moved with purpose. The snow fell straighter. The wind no longer circled, it led. And behind them, the bell stood quiet. But not silent. Never again silent. The path home was not the same as the one they'd taken. It was softer now. Wider. As if the forest had shifted slightly to make room for memory. The trees no longer loomed. They stood like tall witnesses, offering shade instead of questions. Svetlana and Dimitro descended without hurry. They spoke little. But the silence no longer pressed between them. It breathed alongside. At one bend in the trail they paused. Wind brushed through the branches above, not sharp, but warm with weight. It carried no snow, only the scent of pine and ash. "The forest feels different," Svetlana said. Dmytro nodded. "It's not the forest that changed." She smiled, not with joy, but with understanding. And they walked on. On the third day, they reached the clearing where the birch boy had once sat. The flat stone was still there, and on it, another bundle, tied with twine, covered in a scrap of cloth. Svetlana knelt and unwrapped it. Inside, more bark sheets. And something else. A small, hand-carved flute. Rough. Unpolished. Hollow. She lifted it. Pressed it gently to her lips. No melody came. Just breath. And that was enough. They stopped again at Ol's house. The jars still hung in the trees, but fewer now. Some strings were empty, swaying in the breeze. On the porch sat a single jar, left carefully atop a folded shawl. The label read, "Returned." Inside it, a silver button and a folded note. Svetlana read it aloud. "Some things we borrow only to understand what it means to let them go." Oh. She placed the jar inside her bag, beside the birch flute. Dmytro didn't speak. But when she turned to look at him, she saw that his shoulders had lowered, just slightly. Like a pack no longer needed. At dusk they came upon the sleeping river. Still unmoving. Still frozen. But different. The ice shimmered now, not glassy, but glowing faintly with skylight. The doll beneath the surface was gone. And on the opposite bank, near the same stone where the man with the bag of buttons had once sat, a new cairn stood. Small. Fresh. Topped with a strip of blue cloth and a single, round button. No name. But not nameless. Svetlana placed her palm over her chest. Not for him. For all of them. Dmytro bowed his head. And they crossed. The final village appeared before noon the next day. Rhinoc. Alive. Smoke now rose from 5 chimneys. The chapel tower had scaffolding around it. Children moved between porches with firewood and kindling. One window played host to an old radio, broken, but glowing with the memory of music. Irina met them at the square. Her coat was new. Her braid had lengthened. And in her hand she held the bell's clapper. Svetlana smiled. "I believe it's time," Irina said. They walked together to the chapel. The scaffolding creaked as Dmytro climbed to the tower, carrying the clapper in a linen wrap. He worked in silence. And when the final piece was placed, he paused. Svetlana stood below, one hand raised against the light. He didn't ring it. Not yet. Instead, he looked to the treetops and said softly, "Ring when you're ready." He descended, left the bell quiet, but waiting. That night they feasted. Modestly. Bread, stewed cabbage, honey tea. Stories were told. Not loudly, but joyfully. Even laughter returned, in short waves. Like a song long forgotten, but easy to hum once someone begins. Svetlana played the birch flute, breath only, no melody. And still, the village listened. At dawn, she rose before the sun. Dmytro stood by the forest edge, packed lightly. She approached with her notebook under one arm. "You're leaving?" she asked. He nodded. "I've never truly left. But now, I'm ready to return." "To where?" He looked beyond the trees. "There's a cabin east of the river. My cousin's old home. It's still standing. I thought I'd fix the roof." She smiled. "You'll stay long?" "As long as someone needs help listening." They stood a moment. Then she handed him her notebook. "I left one page blank. For your story?" He didn't take it. Instead, he touched it with his hand. Some stories live best unwritten. And that, she knew, was true. She left that afternoon by the lower road. Not by train. Not yet. Just walking. Through villages still unnamed. Past hills that didn't appear on maps. gathering songs not with pen, but with silence. In one town, she gave a lecture on forgotten lullabies. In another, she left a jar on a windowsill with no label at all. And when, weeks later, she passed through the capital, she looked back only once. The wind that followed was not cold. It was warm, full, still carrying the bell's echo. Years passed. The tower remained. Sometimes the bell rang, softly, without touch, and no one feared it. Children called it the wind bell. Elders called it the memory bell. But no one claimed to know who built it, only that it had always been waiting for someone to listen. And on quiet days, when the snow falls just right, it still rings. Not to wake the world, but to remind it that it once knew how to sleep. Waxing crescent moon epilogue. After the pines. You might ask what became of them all. The girl with the braid. The man with the buttons. The boy with the birch bark. The collector of shadows. They're still there. Not frozen in time, but carried forward by it. Softly. Like ash beneath pines. And if you ever walk far enough, or sleep deep enough, you might hear something too. A breath of wind, heavy with names. A song without words. A bell that doesn't demand, only reminds. And you'll know. You've been here before. Softly now, it's over. But perhaps not completely. If you've listened all the way to the end, thank you. Truly. Maybe this story didn't give you an answer, but a feeling. A memory that isn't yours, and yet feels like home. If you enjoyed this journey, I warmly invite you to return. There are more stories to come, more voices, more quiet roads to follow in the dark. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your presence here means more than you know. Take care of yourself, and if ever the bell of memory rings again, let it ring softly, only when you're ready. Until next time, in stillness.